Before we dive right into the practice, I want to point out something I mentioned earlier about two planes that intersect that maybe wasn't 100% clear. So I brought up this extra figure. Notice the figure in the upper left that has planes M and L intersecting. Where do they intersect? Well, two planes are going to intersect at a line. The line they intersect at is QTP. So I want you to focus on that line QTP. And actually, let's just focus on those 3 points for a moment. Point Q, point T, and point P. Now notice, because all three of those points lie on that line, and that line is at the intersection of M and L, what can we say about whether those points lie on those planes? Do Q, T, and P all lie on plane L? Yes. Do Q, T, and P all lie on plane M? Yes. But I thought that 3 points determined a unique plane. So how could it be that 3 points lie on two completely different planes at the same time? Well, it only happens because these 3 points are collinear. They're collinear points. Remember, to determine a unique plane, you need 3 non-collinear points. And it doesn't take that much imagination to realize that these 3 points could be on any number of other planes too. For instance, what if there was a plane that was in the exact same direction as your computer screen? It kind of went across the entire picture here. Could you imagine a plane in that orientation that goes through QTP? Yes, one that cuts right across your computer screen. Hey, what about a plane that pops out of your computer screen directly towards you and goes into your computer screen directly away from you? Can you imagine a plane that looked like that intersects plane QTP, or points QT and P? Yes, you can imagine a plane that goes directly into your computer screen that cuts into all three of those points at the same time. In fact, if I just took L or M and just rotated it around the line QTP, I could orient an infinite number of planes, rotate around that line, that cut through Q, T, and P. That's the problem with collinear points, is that you can't determine a single plane. There's an infinite number of planes that pass through those 3 points. Now, not all planes will, but there is an infinite number of planes that will. All right, and let's just consider now QSP. Notice that S is a little farther out on plane L compared to T. S is not collinear with Q and P. And actually, if you were to try to draw multiple planes through QSP, you'd find that there's actually only one plane that contains all three of those points. And that would be the same plane as plane L, contains QSP. Okay, so 3 non-collinear points determine a plane. 3 collinear points do not determine a plane. And it's not safe for me to even say that 3 points determine a plane, because what if those 3 points are collinear? Then it wouldn't work. Okay, so that's just the initial point I wanted to make using a better figure than I showed you before. Let's move on to the actual practice. And we're going to look at that top figure that has planes R and S, and we're going to do our best to identify all of the lines. Now, I notice that there are 3 lines shown in that figure. Lines are going to be straight figures that have an arrow on both ends. I see that there's a W that goes across plane R, X that goes straight up and down. It's actually the intersection of both planes. And then Y looks like it's on plane S. So I'm going to identify that all 3 of those are lines. Now, notice that I use the simplest notation because I was given lowercase italicized letters to identify my 3 lines. That's fantastic when that happens because it's easy to do. However, let's say instead of being given, for instance, X, instead I was given the points A and B on line X. Now I know A and B are not on line X, but I just want you to envision for a moment that they were on line X. I would have to call that line AB by writing AB and then putting a double-sided arrow over the top. So I don't have to do that because that's not a line in my actual diagram. Just noting that there's more than one way to denote a line. What about a pair of collinear points? This is an easy one. Remember, any 2 points are collinear. So I could identify points like AB. AB are on the same plane, and even though there's no line drawn between them here, A and B are collinear because I could draw a line between them. Another set of collinear points, what about CD? I mean, AD obviously is because they're in the same plane. BD obviously is. What about CD? C and D are pictured in completely different planes in my figure. Well, here's the thing. Just because they're in completely different planes in the figure doesn't mean that they have to be in completely different planes always. I could draw a plane that contains C and D. In fact, I could draw an infinite number of planes that contain both points C and D. And that's what matters. When I say that I need a pair of points that's collinear, it's not asking to give a pair of points that already has a line in the figure. It's asking, can you connect those 2 points with a line? Can I connect C and D with a line? Yes, it's going to be a line that's sort of popping out of the page, out of your screen towards you, but you can connect C and D with a line. Any 2 points can always be connected with a line. Therefore, there's a lot of different pairs of collinear points I can name in this figure. Any pair of collinear points, AD, BC, AC, any of those would work. All right, all of the planes. Well, there's just 2 planes, and they're easy to identify by their script letters. I'm going to identify plane R and plane S as my 2 planes. What about 3 collinear points? 3 coplanar points. 3 points on the same plane. I'd be in trouble if it asked for 3 collinear points because there are no 3 collinear points given. But I do have 3 coplanar points. In fact, any 3 points are coplanar. So I could say, for example, ABD. ABD is an easy one because they're already pictured on the same plane, plane S. What about ABC, though? A and B are on plane S, C is on plane R, but remember, the question isn't, are they already on the same plane in my figure? It's, can I draw a plane that connects all 3 points? And yes, any 3 points can be connected by some plane that you can define. So A, B, and C are coplanar, even if the plane isn't already drawn in this figure. Okay, what about 2 coplanar lines? Well, here, this one's a little tricky if you don't remember that X is a line. And it's easy to lose track of X because it's vertical. It's not in a direction you're necessarily looking at. But if you remember that X is a line, it's not that hard to identify 2 coplanar lines. X and Y are both in the same plane. X and W are in the same plane. What about a pair of non-coplanar lines? Well, okay, so let's just think about this for a second. This is an important realization. There's 2 things that make lines coplanar with one another. Either those 2 lines have to intersect each other. Notice that X and Y intersect, so those are coplanar. X and W intersect, so those are coplanar. As long as 2 lines intersect, they're coplanar, or they have to be parallel with one another. They have to run the exact same direction but never touch. There are no parallel lines in this drawing. So do I have 2 lines in this drawing that are non-parallel and non-intersecting? They can't be parallel, they can't intersect. I would call those lines skew lines, and there are some skew lines. I see that W and Y are skew lines. W is in one plane, Y is in a completely different plane, and they do not intersect. They're non-parallel, non-intersecting. That means that they're non-coplanar. All right, now let's look at the bottom diagram. I'm asked to find the intersection of JK. Oh, here we go. This is a line notation that uses 2 points, J and K, and then it has the double-sided arrow over the top, so I know we're talking about a line. JK and NM. Well, I noticed that between J and K and N and M, these do not intersect. But keep in mind, we're not talking about segments JK and M. We're talking about lines, and lines extend forever. So I have to keep following the line to see if they ever intersect. And if you look, as you continue on the line, these 2 lines intersect at point P. So the intersection of these lines, JK and NM, is point P. That makes sense because we said that the intersection of 2 lines is always going to be a point. The intersection of a line and anything is going to be a point. So what is the intersection of JK and plane W? Well, I see plane W is my main plane here. JK crosses W at K. So I would say that the intersection of the line JK and plane W is just K. And then what about the intersection of NP and plane W. Well, NP crosses plane W at M. Therefore, I'd say M is the intersection. And that is how you work these practice problems involving the three undefined terms in geometry: points, lines, and planes.